Still kind of joining in, but we'll get started. All right, everyone see my screen? Thumbs up. Okay. Well, thank you all for joining the Who Cares track. The answer is hopefully we all care. We're the ones who care. So a regional approach to creating cultures of care in schools. Okay. So this is our culture of care team. We're going to start off with some introductions. As mentioned, I'm Amber McGill. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I started my career in Chicago, where I grew up, worked in community centers, did some community organizing, worked in after-school programs, and then eventually landed in Portland, Oregon, where I worked in high schools for about 14 years. Kind of bringing that social work lens, looking at systems, looking at social justice, elevating student and family voice, and trying to improve the way we serve our historically underserved students and families in the education system. So from there, then moved to Central Oregon for this culture of care position, which was a great opportunity that sort of brought together the social work, education, leadership, and equity work that I've been doing in one school, and now getting the opportunity to look across a region and how do we bring best practices and kind of that systems lens into the work that we're doing to change the experiences our kids are having. So that's me, and I'll hand it off to Amy Yillik.
Well, hello. I've already said that I'm so happy to be here because serving the Washington State area is close to my home. I did my undergrad at University of Washington and then did my master's and then went back and got my doctorate at Seattle Pacific. And my first job as a school counselor was at the Cedro-Woolley Job Corps Center. So I did that and then ended up in management. And I figured I better get my tush back to Oregon because the way I was going, living up in Bellingham, I was going to end up in Alaska someday. So I had to come back to Oregon. I have been a school counselor. I've been a school psychologist. I'm also a counselor educator. I teach for University of Southern California. I've been doing this since 1994, and I feel like I have the very best job. We're all very passionate about trauma responsive equity, but I'm particularly interested in how do we take care of ourselves when we work in such a highly stressful and demanding environment. And I imagine that that doesn't only apply to educators, but it applies to yourself as well. So I'm happy to be here to share a little bit about our work and maybe share some ideas to resist burnout. So, Erin.
Hi, I'm Erin Taylor. I started my career, this is year 20 now. I started as a special educator in rural East Texas before transitioning into becoming a school psychologist, and loved that work, but then decided that rural East Texas was, it was time to move on. And so came to Central Oregon and was behavior specialist in the Redmond School District for 5 years. And through that work, I really became very passionate about the impact of trauma on our students and was really seeing it firsthand. And my passion around this work with culture of care is very much about, okay, what strategies and skills do we give teachers to do different? If we're asking them to shift their approach, what is it they actually do that becomes trauma responsive? And back to you, Amber.
All right, thank you. Okay, so we have about an hour together, and this is our agenda of how we're going to spend that time. So we're going to start off with a land acknowledgement and a check-in, and we'll give you a little bit of a culture of care overview of our work, and then telling our story, year 1, year 2, and we're now in year 3. Amy's going to end us with some staff wellness. And then all along the way, we want to share resources and tools that we've created that we hope will help you out. And at the end, we do have an exit ticket that if you fill that out, we'll send you all of our links and resources and tools. So we really want this to be helpful and beneficial. You can walk away with something that you can utilize. So that's where we're headed. All right. So we would like to acknowledge that this meeting is being held on the traditional lands of the Confederated Tribes in Oregon of Warm Springs, Molalla, Paiute, Klamath, Modoc, Yahuskin Band of Snake Indians, and tribes of Middle Oregon who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. We pay our respects to elders both past and present. Please take a moment to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that bring us here today together. And please join us in uncovering such truths at any and all public events. Thank you. All right. We're going to check in. Where are we at right now as you're coming into this Zoom room? So if you look at the visual here, this is called the blob tree. You're going to find which number you identify with. Who are you feeling today? What number? And you're going to put that in the chat. So take a minute, check in with yourself, how you're doing, and then share that number in the chat, and my colleagues will help monitor the chat. If Amy or Aaron, if you want to share out what you're seeing, since I'm not looking at the
Sure,
chart.
I'm seeing some 14s. Oh, a 15.
Okay.
21.
Yeah, 19. Oh, whoa, you guys are blowing up the chat. That's awesome.
I see a
16.
2.
I haven't seen a 3. That's
A
good.
1.
No one's falling.
4, 5.
Oh, 3. Oh, no.
Oh,
We'll catch you, Amanda.
an 8.
Mhm,
Couple of 19s.
mhm.
17.
14, 15.
Yeah, this is a
Nice.
really great resource for adults and youth. I would say sometimes words or even kind of the facial emotion ones can be hard to connect with. This kind of really shows where you are in your environment and how you're feeling. So I highly recommend it. There's a whole book of Bob Tree numbers and visuals like this, but I think this one is my favorite. So
And
thank you all for
Aaron
checking in.
Aaron and I have agreed that 21 and 20 are us, because put together we're one full-size person.
Nice.
Because we're both pretty short.
We're better together. Yes. All right, thank you. Well, thanks for just recognize where you are coming into this. Just ask that you would engage as much as possible, and hopefully you'll get a lot out of it. Okay, kind of moving into our overview. Our mission is impacting educational culture and outcomes with trauma responsive, restorative, and equitable practices that systematically promote wellness, safety, and community support for all. So that those three, the trauma responsive, restorative, and equitable, are really the foundation of the work, and that all the things that we do really fall under that umbrella. And then the visual to the right are the practices, professional development, trainings, workshops, coaching are really around these core components, from the trauma-informed and responsive care, restorative practices, SEL, equity, and that professional wellness and resilience, which we'll also spend some time today on. Okay, so our logic model, I went from working in a high school, being surrounded by 2,000 teenagers every day for like 14 years, to spending my time with adults. And so this is actually a good reminder for me sometimes when I miss being in that environment and being directly with our young people. So what we believe is that if we're able to provide high quality training and ongoing professional learning to all school staff, then school staff will be more equipped to supportively address the symptoms of trauma in schools, and improvement in student resilience, well-being, and educational success will follow. So this will lead to longer-term success and health outcomes, as both mitigate the known negative effects of childhood trauma. So we know that if our adults that are working with young people have a different mindset, are growing and learning in their professional development, they have different practices and tools and ways of responding, then our young people are going to have a different experience. The only way to change their experience is really to shift the practices of the adults that serve them. So that's really the driving force of the structure of culture of care, where our primary clients, quote unquote, are the adults in the school level, as well as the district and regional level. All right, and then our objectives. So These 5 objectives each have targets that we're kind of tracking to make sure that we're meeting them. But the main areas are that workplace wellness. So we're looking at how we're taking care of ourselves and each other in this work. That trauma-informed lens, being able to have the understanding of how trauma impacts the brain, how it shows up in the behaviors and lives of the people we serve. And then 3 is to really have the approaches and practices to respond to that in a way that recognizes that root cause and gets at being more responsive than reactive. And then we really want all educators and our community partners and folks to use these strategies to create a welcome, safe, and supportive environment in schools that we know improves attendance and academic achievement. And then ultimately, as a result of working with our team, educational systems and community partners will shift towards a more trauma responsive, restorative, and equitable culture. So that's kind of what the driving forces of our work are, that we're really tracking to see where are we making an impact, what is changing in the daily practices. Okay. And now we talked about a little of what a culture of care is. Now what it is not. It's not making classroom teachers and counselors, counselors, or therapists, but partners in sensitizing their perceptions to hurting students' needs. All right, a lot of us, we can, even if we're not a counselor or a therapist, we can be therapeutic. We can offer that support, even if that's not our role. And it's not where educators ask, how do I get the student to change their behavior? I wish they would just do something different or knock it off, right? But instead we ask, what is driving that behavior? What can I do at this very moment to improve my relationship with this student? That is ultimately going to change then our dynamic and where we can get. It's also not making teachers community activists necessarily, but it's advocating for systematic support for themselves and their students. So where are the things that we're seeing that need to be changed on a systems level, and helping to advocate for that. And then it's not making teachers add more to their already crowded syllabi. I think that's true for all of us who serve young people, to not add more to our plate, right? But how do we embed social emotional literacy into overall curriculum, classroom techniques, school processes, like our culture in general? We just integrate how we're connecting relationally, how we're teaching these strategies into what we do. Okay, and just a few quotes from some of our mentors and kind of guiding folks in the practices. So the trauma-informed model works for all students. Everyone benefits from being treated with kindness and connecting to caring staff. So, right, we don't have to say, oh, these young people have experienced trauma and these have not, so we better approach, right? We use this approach to all of our students, all of our staff, all the folks that we're working with, because we know this is best practice for everyone. The overarching goal of a culture of care is to prevent, reduce, and de-escalate problematic behaviors, not by serving up consequences, right? This traditional punitive model that we've had in so many of our institutions, but by building relationships where students feel safe and emotionally regulated enough to learn. So we're trying to get to that place where we can get them safe, calm, in that space where their learning brain can kick in and be successful. And then finally, Bruce Perry, there is no more effective intervention than a safe relationship. Right? We see the impact that trauma has and the barriers it can create. And when our young people don't have a place to bring that trauma, that's where the biggest challenges show up. And so if we can create a safe space for them to come and heal, and that healing, which research shows, is through relationship. That is how trauma heals. So that's our job, is how do we take a rigid, like historically not great system for serving all students, right, such as education, and how do we infuse and shift things to be more relational, to be more trauma responsive, and to have that equity lens to serve all students better. Speaking of equity, so this is just a visual, and many of you may have seen this or are familiar with these terms, but just want to clarify and again offer you a resource or something maybe you can use in your work. So we understand that inequality, this top left visual, is like unequal access to opportunities, right? The tree is bent one way, and that's clearly serving one better than another, and it's just sort of the way things are. And then equality, that's everyone gets the same thing, right? Evenly distributed tools and assistance. You get the same size ladder, you get the same thing. That's only fair, right? That's a very entrenched value, I feel like, of our country a lot of times. It should be fair. And so that means it doesn't matter if it's what you need or what will help, but everyone should get the same thing. So you can see that's pretty much the same as the inequality, right? Only there's an appearance or there's a feeling like, well, we did something, right? We tried, there's something in place, even if it hasn't made any difference. And then equity in the bottom left here, custom tools that identify and address inequality. So we recognize, right, the tree here in this case is not accessible to all. So we're going to not give the same thing, but give adjusted, customized, differentiated tools, this ladder, so that both young people there can reach and have access to their resources. And then, this is where we're doing our work, is trying to move into justice. So a lot of times, a lot of energy in education right now is trying to move into equity, but really ultimately is how do we look at fixing the system to offer equal access to both tools and opportunities. So, right, this is fixing that tree so it more equally shares those resources and offers that. So in the, equity is sort of that strategy, that sort of necessary thing because the system is broken or designed in a way to not serve everyone well, that we put those in place while we work towards justice so that eventually we don't need those different tools. So anyway, just a visual, this is kind of where we're trying to do in our work, is leading for equity, and how do we move that mentality and mindset more towards that justice experience for all. Okay, and then what does that feel like for our young people? So they should feel I'm valued for my strengths and contributions. I'm respected for who I am. My voice is heard and appreciated. I feel cared about. I care about others. I see myself, my family, and my community represented. I'm empowered to achieve my goals and full potential. I see my place and responsibility in creating a better future. I feel comfortable and welcomed. I'm confident and challenged. So this is the goal. This is the dream, right, of where we want all of our young people to be when we do experience that equity. All right. And then this is just an overview of our service delivery framework, of how we're accomplishing it. Kind of shared our mission and, those driving goals and objectives, and how, we're in year 3 of a grant, and we'll kind of talk about the timeline a little bit, but this shares like, what is it that we've actually been doing? So the structure is that we serve 6 school districts in our region, as well as our community partners. We have communities of practice that are across a region that are, go back to those core components of our mission. So trying to offer safe spaces for adults to learn, to grow, to ask questions, to be up on the latest, research and best practices. We also have a regional advisory team that provides vision, guidance, funding, connection to the folks we serve in our community. So trying to get a pulse on how things are going, what are the needs right now, how can we best serve them? And then we offer coaching, consultation, and professional development to the districts, to our community partners, really based on their priorities and what they need. And then we've really developed a lot of community partnerships to make sure in our region, it's not just schools that have this mindset, but the after school programs, the parks and recreation, our juvenile justice, right? All of the different entities that are serving young people. How can we all share the same vision so that our young people have that same experience no matter where they go? And then we get, really down into the school level teams to provide that coaching and see the changes they want to make, and the data that they're looking at, and how they can align services to best meet needs of students. And then we develop a lot of resources, which is one of the things we want to share with you today. A lot came in response to COVID, as far as virtual resources and how to think about things differently. So we're excited to share some of that with you. Okay, and then here is, so I know it's a lot of words on this slide, and we're going to share everything with you. This is actually a second page of our newsletter for the fall, but it really outlines our services, and kind of on the left side, it has the ideal, the progress markers of what a culture of care is, what it would look like at a school at the tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 level. So tier 1 is what all students get. What are the things in place, kind of policies, procedures, culture that everyone has access to? And then tier 2 is that a little more targeted intervention, what some young people get that need a little more support. And then that tier 3 is that, a smaller number of people, but more intensive services. So this is kind of what things would look like in an ideal environment that would say this is a true culture of care. And then on the right-hand side are the services that we provide to help communities get there. So it's a lot of what I already talked about as far as the coaching and professional development, but where we try to plug in to help schools see where they're at and then where they want to get. Okay, so I'm going to hand it off to Erin in a minute to kind of walk through the different years of the grant and on all the highlights and resources that we've created to share some with you. But just as a brief, to give you some context, so in 2018, Better Together, which is our kind of convening nonprofit in the region, High Desert Education Service District, and TRACES, which is really the trauma responsive, trauma informed entity in our region as well, got together with school districts and submitted a grant application to the Central Oregon Health Council. And this grant was really focused on, we see the trajectories of what, childhood trauma, where it sends our kids, right? All the shortened life expectancy, all the, negative health outcomes. And so they decided we want to intervene in school. So if we can change those trajectories, change those outcomes by bringing healing through education, that will change the outcomes of a lot of our young people's lives. So that was sort of the goal of the grant. And then in 2019, 1.5 million was awarded to Better Together. And they hired us 3 culture of care coaches here. July of 2019, we started. And then we worked with the Child and Youth Resilience Measure, which was a data point to really look at what does resilience look like in our young people. Worked with schools on goal setting and coaching, and then moving into 2020, which we all remember like it was yesterday or 10 years ago. We actually had a 4th coach was hired to our team to serve a specific county. And then COVID and lots of pivots and adjusting, and our work became really relevant. And folks were, everyone, before we had to kind of convince people this is what trauma is, this is how it impacts your brain and your ability to function. And then we kind of were all sitting in this, right, this sort of uncertainty, this long-term chronic stress. So it became way more relatable. And we started developing a lot of resources and showing up to support communities. Started supervising masters in social work interns to be in the schools to kind of be an extension of our work, and then working on a developmental evaluation model. So because we're sort of creating this as we went, there wasn't a clear way to evaluate it. So instead, it's sort of this ongoing fluid developmental process. So we're using that with our university partners to kind of evaluate and shape our work. And then moving into 2021, we've started some communities of practice, which I think Erin will talk more about. Envoy as well, which is kind of classroom management approaches. We kind of redesigned a little bit our team, where I'm in a lead coach role, doing kind of administrative, and really I feel like we're coming into our own as far as our team and where our strengths lie and where the work is, and then looking at sustainable funding development. So that's been us so far as we move forward. And I will hand it off to Erin to start with year 1.
Yeah, so I'm going to unpack a little bit about our year 1 journey. When we were hired, again, we had these lofty grant goals. So we as a team had to come together and really start putting our brains together to say, what is a culture of care? We have the grant goals and objectives, but we envisioned it a little bit even broader than just trauma-informed care. So began really thinking about what is our true mission and vision in the work. And with that, we then started creating a needs assessment of what are the real elements that a school culture or a district culture would have that would show that they're shifting their approaches and shifting their systems to be more trauma responsive, equitable, and restorative. We also started thinking, how do we take 3 people and serve an entire region? So we really kind of looked at it as a 2-level support system. We could offer regional consultations. So any school district or community partner in the region, we could provide some thought partnering, provide some simple supports, and really think about how do we become more intentional then around a smaller pool of priority schools. To identify our priority schools for year one, our advisory team was very, very helpful. We relied on them to start to really identify schools that were willing and ready to do the work. And by partnering with those schools first, we actually were able to gain a lot of traction. Next slide, Amber. And year one highlights. Well, we started with creating a website, and that was pretty exciting to get something up and going. But then one of our main partnerships was with the Oregon State University Cascades campus. And part of the journey is talking about what happened. So that developmental evaluation in partnership with OSU was incredibly powerful to really get some impact statements from our partners, from our advisory team, and to just kind of tell the story of where we came from. And through that developmental evaluation, that it was overwhelmingly shared that the Culture of Care initiative was quite successful, and schools and partners were seeing that it was very valuable with the support. A collective, that advisory team was incredibly thoughtful and very committed to the work. So having those continuing checkpoints and saying, okay, we are envisioning this, and having them say, yes, that's exactly what we need. And then at the school level, we delved into some very strategic goal setting and professional development delivery around those goals to help really start shifting culture. And that quote at the bottom is from our developmental evaluation. This is not just another initiative. It's a game changer. If it's All Better Together did, or All Traces did, it would change the world. It would be legitimate if this was all we did. Amber, would you like to open the website for us real quick? So this is our website. Please, by all means, check us out. If you go to the resources page, there's all kinds of resources there. You can see it broke down by different topics. And then off to the right, there's some videos that you can watch. And we add resources pretty consistently to our website. Next slide. So year two work, what did that look like? Well, we started, these were our four main buckets of looking at our work in year two. You know, year one was about getting us off the ground and getting us going. Year two began to start shifting. And part of our, we look at year two as including a little bit of that COVID stuff. So we really in year two sunk into regional leadership and systems coaching. So thinking, how do we impact the larger community? We continued with our priority school coaching and professional development. We started delving into those distance learning resources. We were finding that schools really needed some guidance around several different things, and we could create resources that were accessible and easy to follow. And then we also were able to expand our community consultation and collaboration. So really the beautiful elements of our work is that it's not just contained to schools. We're able to bridge the gap between our community partners and schools to say, how can we work together and create a stronger support system in the community as a whole? Next slide, please. And highlights from year two, it started getting really fun. We hosted at the beginning of the 2020 school year, a trauma responsive leadership summit. We had teams from all across the region from various schools participate in this 2 days, and we hosted Jim Sporleader from the Paper Tigers documentary. Through that leadership summit, teams started creating school plans of how they were going to implement their learning from that summit. And we were able to then circle support from ourselves as coaches around those strategic plans. We also rolled out some restorative practices trainings across the region, and very, very highly attended and very built a lot of excitement for the region. We know that exclusionary discipline has got to shift, and by offering these basic trainings, we were able to talk with teams about how do we start making those shifts in our systems. Bright, which is Bridges for Youth in Transition. This program is on the East Coast, and we worked with one of our school partners throughout that school year to just start thinking about how does this program look for school districts over here in Oregon. And what this program is really designed to do is to allow students who, number one, are transitioning from other programs, so juvenile justice or treatment programs, to give them a safe place to land when they're coming back into schools. But then also providing some tier 3 support to students who are really struggling with behavioral success in schools. And then finally, we kept with that district level coaching. We were really excited to partner with one of our school districts, and their monthly leadership team meetings, we were able to just start infusing some elements of equity throughout those, just to help keep folks thinking about it and to really become intentional about things like inclusive language. And then those resources over there on the side. Amber, would you open those content-specific toolkits? So we know that leadership really, they were highly interested in keeping elements of trauma-informed care and equity into their ongoing staff meetings. But oftentimes didn't have time to really do legwork for what are resources, what are some videos, what are some articles that we can delve into to keep this fresh. So rather than having leadership do it on their own, we were able to create these toolkits that really, you can see that there's videos, there's modules, there's articles, some different activities that can be done with staff. We wanted to make a one-stop shop to make it easy for our school teams to delve into their learning. And these equity toolkits, you can see there's lots of different topics there. There's equity, grief and loss, social emotional learning. This is the trauma and responsive toolkit. All these are linked onto our website. Go ahead and open the classified learning opportunities, Amber. When COVID hit, we knew that we needed to provide something for our educational assistants across the region. We heard loud and clear, this is a perfect opportunity to give them time to delve into some professional learning on their own as well. So this is a wealth of all kinds of articles and videos and podcasts, some modules that folks could delve into that really helped them support shifting their thinking and shifting the lens of their approaches to trauma responsive, equitable, and inclusive. There's all kinds of topics and links in that. And then finally, we created some community healing circles. We know that our kids have been impacted significantly from COVID, and we're seeing behaviors that are sometimes more extreme than had been seen before. So this community healing circle was strategically created to support teams in debriefing some situations, walking through some healing and some sharing out. We know social emotional learning is important, and it's important for our staff as well. And by engaging in these healing circles, we heard that, you know, we don't want to do that touchy-feely stuff, but overwhelmingly, as folks left out of these healing circles, they felt empowered. They felt like they were truly building a stronger connection and building community. Again, on our website, please feel free to check that out. And next slide, Amber. And then finally, over our 2021 school year, which was highly impacted by COVID, we were still able to provide 6 regional professional learning opportunities serving over 300 attendees. We provided leadership level professional development and resources to all 6 school districts in our region. We delivered direct professional development or coaching to 18 schools. And overall, we impacted 48 schools and 11 community partners, which means that we impacted over 1,500 individuals with our work in the 2021 school year. Now, Amy is going to tell you a bit about our journey in year 3.
If I can find the unmute button. So in years 1 and 2, we spent a lot of time doing that direct service work with schools, and we have this year expanded to host communities of practice, and each of us has our own kind of area of interest. This is our newsletter, and Erin, who just spoke, is hosting a culture of care classroom. It's a community of practice, like a professional learning opportunity for educators. Amber is much more interested in the restorative practices, and so she's hosting one in the region as well. And then my area of interest is on wellness, and so I am hosting a read along with the educator wellness book that was just released last week. So doing a lot of work in that capacity, really getting in and helping educators, leaders just go deeper and have some experience to talk with each other about the work that they're doing. So I already talked about the regional communities of practice. We have individual districts that we work with. We have, there are 6 in our region, and we are doing specifically in one of our areas, Erin is taking on the Envoy training, which is really classroom management with the trauma responsive lens, moving from a power position to more of an influence position within classroom teaching strategies, also helping promote the restorative justice piece. And then we still do, I would say year 1 and 2, the number 1 primary request from schools was on wellness. And it's still a very large portion of what we do, but schools are seeing that we offer much more than just understanding the burnout cycle. So, and we've been able to partner with Parks and Recreation here in our community, also down in California. We did a training yesterday in El Paso. So our work is definitely spreading, and we're so happy because it's so powerful. Amber, if you click on the Culture of Care PD menu, we created this this year as just kind of a 1-page offering to share with schools, you know, that they have a one-stop shop to look at the types of trainings we could provide. And again, we're not just hooked into only providing at school level. We are more than willing to share our information with community members as well. So if you have a need in your community, please feel free to reach out to us, and we'll see if there's something that we can do to support your work as well. Okay, and we've already looked, implementation guides, sure. So we have created a variety of implementation guides, and this is really the work helping schools understand what are the steps if you want to have a school that's a culture of care. You know, what are the steps that a school would need to take if you want to have a professionally resilient school community or restorative practices. So we created these best practice implementation guides. Amber, could you click on the culture of care? And these are all available on our website. And again, at the end, if you give us your email address, we'll email you all these slides and resources. So you can see it talks about what is a culture of care, kind of looks at some of the data, the research that really promotes that we have better learning outcomes and better cultures when we use a culture of care. And then again, here's the MTSS model that we developed so that schools understand how our work really aligns with the work they're doing. So that's really one of the most important things about our work, is that we don't want to be that team that comes in and adds another thing. Right? We all have to do that next thing, but rather what we would like to do is say, you have goals and objectives on your school. This is how we fit into those goals and objectives. So those are our implementation guides. Thank you. And next slide, please. All right, so I know that not all of you are educators, though I feel like so many of us are just educators at heart. This next discussion, it's really useful for anyone in a helping profession, anyone that works with that, people where the demand is never met, right? Like there's always more than we can handle. And I don't know, I imagine that might be true for some of you. So I'd like to share a little bit about the work that we're doing and how we're helping people take care of themselves. So next slide. All right, so burnout. We've all heard that term. Some of us have probably experienced that. So on the left side of the screen is our burnout cycle. And just so you know, I created this digital piece, and I didn't understand, I couldn't figure out how to make it so it looked like you could also get out. I've had people look at it and go, how do I get out of the burnout cycle? Does it ever end? And so we counterimpose that with the wellness culture on the other side. So each of those kind of steps correlate with each other. And then the wellness culture, those research-based strategies that we know that people who use them are less likely to experience burnout. So burnout was coined by a researcher named Freudenberger in the 70s. And he started his work looking at healthcare workers. And what he found is that healthcare workers, or people who are in the helping profession, that oftentimes their sense of self is fed by helping other people, right? Like, I'm sure that that's probably true for most of you. That's certainly true for myself. Meaning in my life is if I can help other people kind of be their best version, then I feel like I have done something worthy, right? And so he would say that the start of the burnout cycle actually starts with that mindset, that the helping mindset can set us up to get stuck in the cycle. In the 80s, with all their research, they identified very predictable patterns and steps that happen for people who get into burnout. We have changed the cycle a little bit because, yes, we believe that people who are helpers might have more of a propensity to be burnt out. But I know, after having worked in the schools since 1994, that in education, and I imagine in your work as well, demand always exceeds capacity. So even if my temperament is to kind of put me towards burnout, it doesn't matter who you are working in a system that is broken and that it is primed for burnout. So we start here at the top where demand exceeds capacity. And when we are asked, when there's too much to do, what do? We work harder, right? That was always my MO, for sure. And when I'm working harder, I'm often ignoring my needs, right? Oh, I didn't eat lunch today, but that's okay. I'll eat a snack on the way home. I'll eat in my car, or I'll just pick something up on, my drive home. I didn't sleep very much last night. Maybe tomorrow I'll have a better night's sleep. Oh my gosh, I haven't drank any water today. Or, oh my gosh, I've been drinking coffee all day. I didn't even realize that, right? So when we are in that working harder mode, it is so much more difficult to really take care of ourselves. So then as we start to ignore our needs, the next phase is that panic and conflict. And that's that idea of, oh my gosh, I'm like not taking care of myself, but there's so much going on. And then what do? In burnout, we work even harder, right? Then it becomes like hyper focus on work, just incredibly like I think of like Tiger Woods focus, right? Like just really hyper, everything is about work. And then we move into the denial and blaming. For me, this is really my cue, this denial and blaming. When I feel this and how it plays in my head is that I say, if only, right? If only my boss, if only the families I work with, if only my colleagues, right? I've got this idea that somehow if they did something different, then I wouldn't be so overwhelmed at work. And some of that may be true, right? I mean, sometimes we work in environments where it might be we're short staffed. And so if our bosses hired more people or whatever, that life would be better. So much of my knowledge about burnout and really trauma came from a real life event in one of the schools that I worked in. We had a student die by suicide in a classroom very violently in front of other students. The classroom was almost full. And I was one of the key members that kind of helped the school start to heal. And I wouldn't say get back to normal because I don't know that that school ever returned to normal. It was a new normal. But I was experiencing a lot of this. And I remember with the denial and blaming piece, about 2 months in, I was just physically, emotionally, spiritually exhausted. And I went to my boss and I said, you know, I am so tired. I just need some help. And then he said, well, we don't have substitutes for school psychologists. And I'm like, I understand, but I am so exhausted. In the last 2 months, I have only cooked 2 meals for my family. And his response was, well, your kids are old enough to cook for themselves. So in that moment, I had a lot of very, prime words that were going on in my head at that time. But what that told me was nobody was going to rescue me. Nobody was going to save me from this situation. I had to figure out how to change what I was doing so that I wasn't so exhausted. All right. So the next stage, and since then he has since apologized and recognized that that was pretty insensitive of him. So the next stage is that we isolate and we use poor coping strategies. When we are exhausted and tired, right, and we want to feel better, the idea of going for a run or going to the gym when we are exhausted is something that seems way bigger than what we're capable of. And so oftentimes in burnout, what we end up doing is we are drawn to those activities that change the way we feel quickly and easily, right? So drinking more wine. Washington has legal marijuana, so smoking more marijuana, right? Watching TV, oversleeping, overeating, spending too much time on the computer, shopping, whatever that is, especially online shopping, right? Gaming, whatever that is, it changes how we feel really quick, but it doesn't require a lot of energy for us. And it's not necessarily fueling us in a healthy way. As we move along in burnout, the next stage is people become concerned. So, for me, it was my husband would come home and he's like, something needs to change. You are always on the couch. You're not going hiking anymore. You don't really participate in the family the way that you used to. Something has to change. And so he recognized that I was different, that my work had become all consuming. The feeling around burnout is numb and robotic. When we wake up in the morning and burnout cycle, oftentimes it's like, oh, please, I don't want to go to work today. It's that idea of dread, right? Just not another day. It's all going to be the same. How am I going to get through it? And because so much of our identity comes in helping, when we are in the burnout cycle and we get there, we don't feel like we're doing a very good job anymore. And we're probably not. We're probably not doing as good of a job as we would if we were well. And so those feelings of worthlessness really set in. And then if we stay in that too long, we end up in that really scary place of depression, exhaustion, suicidal ideation, or even suicidal attempts. And so what I would encourage you to do is, if you find yourself in any of these stages, and if you have experienced that, you can go ahead right now, type in the chat. If you're feeling brave, where have you found yourself in burnout cycle in your career? What stages have you found yourself in? For me, that denial and blaming, the poor coping strategies, sugar is my go-to for sure. All right, and let's move over to wellness really quick. So what we did is we looked at, well, when demand exceeds capacity, what does research say we should do? And research says we should assess and reflect. That is what we should be doing. We should be looking at how can we adjust what's going on, setting boundaries, right? And setting boundaries isn't about saying no. It's about trying to figure out how to take care of yourself and still do the job that you're doing. I've had people say, oh, Amy, you need to come to school. You need to do this job. And maybe I was at a training or something. Okay, I'll be right there. And as I come to the stairs, and like the resource officer and the principal are there, and they're like, hey, the family's in the conference room. And what I did was I had learned about burnout at that point. And I said, okay, hold on a second. I need to put my stuff in my office and then I'll be right up. And that was setting a boundary. And they didn't say, Yillik, you're not working. You are what, right? That wasn't their response was, okay, all right. And so I went to my office, which was all the way in the back of the building. I closed my door. I filled up my water bottle and I ate my yogurt and granola. Like, I will never forget that moment. That was such a big moment. And I did that because I knew the day was going to be long. I better take care of myself. And so that is the piece of figuring out how to adjust what you're doing while taking care of yourself. We got to listen to our body. We got to figure out what does our body need, and then use those regulation strategies. Those strategies that we teach our kids, if you're parents, or, if you're working with kids in the juvenile justice system, that's like, breathe, right? We have to use those ourselves. We need to invest in our health, whether that's taking care of our medical needs, our dental needs, our, therapeutic needs, eating fresh, healthy food. Those are the things we need to invest in that and be solution focused. So when I get to that denial part, right, if only my teammates would step up, right? I don't think I've ever thought that once about this team. Then I need to get in, okay, what's going on? How do I change what's happening here? What's my role in this? And then instead of leaning towards those poor coping strategies, seek connection. Do something creative. You're going to feel so much better in the end when you do that. Cultivate growth and purpose. For me, this is really about, I don't know what you would call it, your soul, your spirit, your heart, whatever. But that little part of you, like I imagine it like a pilot light. Right? It's your spark. Do those things that keep that spark going. Because I know, like, if I let my pilot light go out on my fireplace, it's no different if I let my pilot light go out on myself. It's much harder to get it going after it's stopped than to just keep that little flame going on and on. So figure out what it is that gets that spark in you, and then use that. Practice it. Practice vulnerability and gratitude. You have to be able to say, this is hard and I need help. And we all need help. And yet we're all afraid to say, I need help. Extend self-compassion. Use positive self-talk, right? Don't talk to yourself differently than you would a loved one. Talk to yourself like you matter. Talk to yourself like you're doing the best job that you can do. And then prioritize rest and joy. So with all of these, I'm wondering if in the chat, you wouldn't mind either putting in something that you currently use from wellness culture that your feels like a strong wellness activity, or something that you'd like to try. So for me, my listen to my body is probably the one I need to do. I keep trying not to drink coffee all damn day. But working from home, it's so hard not to. So I'm curious what y'all would like to try and how that what you're doing that is working well for you. Ooh, embroidery. I know who said that. Setting boundaries, assess and reflect. All right. Wonderful. Well, I truly believe that the work that we are all doing is probably one of the most important things that we can do on this planet. And so I am hopeful that you will give yourself the same care that you give to those around you, because you are absolutely worthy, for sure. Next slide, please.
Amy, there's another hand embroidery person.
Oh, yep. Whoop, whoop. Erin taught me recently, and now I am hooked, or I'm stitched, I guess. All right. Questions. You can either put them in the chat, or you can be brave and unmute your microphone. If you have any questions or thoughts about the work that we're doing, we have a few minutes here. Give people a second. We're gonna, in the next slide, someone asked if you should enter your email now. On the next slide, and you can go ahead and go to that, Amber. We have this QR code, and I also think one of my partners is going to put in the chat a link to our survey. Because we are grant funded, we really appreciate the feedback. It helps us share the work that we're doing, and hopefully, since we're at year 3 of a 3-year grant, we would really like to be refunded. So if you could fill that out, there's a place for you to leave your email, and we'll make sure to get all of the resources that we have. All right, Jennifer. Jennifer is curious about step-by-step idea of how schools move into a trauma-responsive culture school-wide. Would one of my teammates like to answer that one?
I can start, and then Erin to chime in. So we found that really an implementation step 1 is just that basic 101 knowledge and understanding. So mindset. So giving all staff, and not just the teaching staff, right, or the leadership team or the counselors, but your custodian, your cafeteria workers, your bus driver. So everyone involved in the community gets the same training and access to learning. And so just understanding what that trauma-informed lens is, beginning with that, the neurobiology of, right, what trauma does to the brain. And so moving from having that trauma-informed lens, and how do we apply that? How do we interrupt our assumptions about, oh, that kid's just being a jerk, or, oh, I need to do this. So starting to apply that lens and get some practice in it, so that then we can have different practices and approaches. And so I would say that would be step 1 for me. And then really, I would hand it off to Erin to maybe talk about the management strategies. Then what do we do once we know better, then we do better?
Yeah, exactly. I completely agree, Amber. First is building that knowledge, and then, how do we shift our approach? For me, Michael Grinder's Power to Influence continuum work was a huge eye-opener and a support in thinking about, it's almost never what we say to kids that's the problem. It's almost always how we say it. And the how we say things can be very triggering to our youth. So thinking about, how do we manage our classrooms in a way that honors the individual and separates the person from the behavior. And that Power to Influence continuum that he teaches, to me, was incredibly powerful and eye-opening. And then creating that predictability in our practices. How do we get rhythms going into our classroom? How do we create structures that are predictable? How do we call attention from our students that's consistent and predictable every day? How do we set them up for independent work that's predictable and easily accessible? So yeah, that's kind of where I go next. And then once we have those structures in place, how are we creating break spaces in our classrooms and out of our classrooms? How are we normalizing discussing our emotions with emotional check-ins? I truly believe social emotional learning is a huge need in our schools, and I believe curricula are great. However, social emotional learning doesn't just happen from a curricula. We can do a lot of practices that normalize social emotional learning that are beyond a curriculum. So emotional check-ins, simply identifying when the teacher needs a break, when the students need a break, thinking about strategic use of brain breaks to do that bottom-up regulation for our students. And once that's normalized, now you have the ball rolling and it's just becoming part of our culture.
And then I would add ongoing, oh, sorry, Amy.
No, go ahead.
But I was going to say ongoing to how you're kind of measuring and evaluating that it's actually happening, which a lot of is incorporating student voice. Is their experience any different? Do they feel safer? Do they feel like they belong? Like once we have that knowledge base, then we have actual skills and strategies. We have some school-wide systems and practices. Then we need to be able to evaluate that, continuous improvement style. So constantly getting input, taking a look is how's it going? Where are the gaps? What can we do better? That's what I would recommend is sort of that next level.
Thank you. It looks like Jordanos has a question. Feel free to unmute.
Thank you. So I'm figuring out how to ask this question. So walk with me as I think and talk here. So I was thinking about the last question that you posed to us about what we want to try, or what do we do on that map that was on the screen earlier. And I was thinking about the things that I do, right? The taking time to self, the resting. And there are definitely things that I do, but I find that I'm most restored when I'm in the company of folks who are outside systems that we work in. And so how in the support that you're providing to educators and students and just the overall school climate, what's the nod to get folks to understand that my path in this work looks very, very, very different from, say, a person who doesn't hold my identities?
Right. That's a great question. So almost when I do trainings on stress and burnout, which are much longer than what I shared with you today, I talk about the stress spectrum, where on one end, there's healthy stress all the way over to burnout. And in that, what I talk about is that intensity and duration are key to whether we're in healthy stress or burnout, all the way along on that spectrum, and that it is unique to everyone. What fills me, the fact that I'm here presenting, this is like one of the coolest things I get to do, right, is come here and present. But I imagine if I asked a few of you, hey, could you step in and take over for me today? Your response would not be excited or enthusiastic, right? Like for a lot of people, public speaking is not their jam. So that would be a stressful event. So we really try to help individuals figure out what is it that you need. I feel the same way. Nature is my church. I love it. I know I'm not doing as well when I'm not in nature. So I hope that answers. Did I walk along that with you and answer that correct? Or I guess I didn't answer it correctly. That was my answer. Was that what you're looking for?
I think our shoulders brushed. I think our shoulders brushed. I'm thinking more so with the interactions that we have with other stakeholders or folks we work in partnerships with, and having the respect there and the honoring of one's talents and intelligence and the strengths that we all bring. I mean, I'm just thinking about like the different interactions that I have with people, whether it's principals, whether it's superintendents, whether it's families, just everyone, and just really hoping that there is some sort of acknowledgement built into the support that's provided to everybody, so that folks are being mindful that, we are all connected in this. There's a saying that I'll share with everybody really quickly that says, I am what I am because of who we all are, right? So as we're learning how to cope, and as we're learning how to take care of ourselves, folks really being mindful of how we're treating each other, and making sure that there's more of a collective lens that we're zeroing in on as we're doing the work. So it's not so individualistic, because we
Right.
do I impact you, you impact me.
Absolutely. And that, I think what you're getting at is like the foundation of our work, that culture of care. We want to have that student voice. Do they feel safe? Do they feel respected? Do they feel heard? But also we want our employees to feel that way. Do you feel safe? Do you feel respected? Do you feel heard? That is a key component of that trauma responsive, restorative, equitable approach. It's not just for the students. We can't, what's that saying? A dysregulated adult can't regulate a dysregulated child. Well, a unhealthy system can't raise an unhealthy child in a healthy manner. And so we have to look at the whole. I hope that's helpful.
I can add to it. I think but my experience has been a lot of modeling. So I think we come into spaces all the time, whether it's a superintendent, a principal, right, a community partner, and they may not have had the same, mindset shift or understanding, and that happens a lot. Whether it's about, we've had one particular leader who was kind of like, why are we spending so much time on the adults? They just need to get it together. We need to focus on the kids, right? Like all this time spent in like supporting and like coddling the adults is like a waste of time. And so having to over time model that, both in the meetings that we do, and then also in our work day to day, and then also share like that for that leader, like their staff voice or their student, like the different experience that students then have when the staff isn't at the end of their rope and losing it every 15 minutes in a class. So I think a lot of our role is educating, and I think gently, challenging in strategic ways. But a lot of it is just modeling, because, some folks aren't there yet. And I had a principal once, we did a climate survey and it came out really terrible for the school. Staff were burnt out. It was just a very toxic environment. And that leader did not want us to share that with the whole school because they were worried it would make them look bad. And we can't, it was just like having to coach them through, like, we've got to look at how things are so that we can make a difference, right? Like people are, gossiping and talking under the radar about this no matter what. So if we could at least bring it out in the open, like, this is where we're at, how do we move forward? Which is really hard when egos are involved and identity, right? And all of this in leadership. So I think it takes a lot of like strategy and dancing kind of sometimes around egos, but really moving forward, saying this is ultimately to benefit kids. And most people can't argue with that. We're student-centered and we want ultimately our students to have the best experience. Then we need a healthy community. We need healthy individuals. We need to take care of each other. So I would say it's complicated, and I appreciate your question. It is a lot of the work that we're trying to build.
That's wonderful. Any last questions or thoughts before we send you back to the main room? Feel like you've been sent to your room when you're in breakouts. I'm going to send you to your room.
Hey, it's Ellis chiming in. Oops, and with an
Yeah.
echo. Sorry about that. We can totally conclude, especially if people are done with Q&A, but I'm happy to leave this room open for a little while longer in case people have some chats that have going on in the background or need to connect with folks. So I'm definitely not going to obligate this awesome team any longer, but if other folks want to chat because we can't do this in person, we are here. I believe we're still planning on doing our panel at 1:45, so please make sure you're taking care of yourself in between now and then.
I love that shout out for taking care of yourself. Thank you, Ellis.
Totally.
And we'll hang out a few minutes just in case anybody has any direct questions or comments. And
thanks so much for having us.
yeah, so good. I feel like I got a little bit of my 90s life today, knowing where y'all are. So Oh, we're glad. We're glad this was helpful.
And reach out if there's somewhere we can collaborate or present or kind of brainstorm with you. We're happy to be thought partners and resource givers as well.
Yeah, sure. All right. Well, I think I'm gonna go.
I'll hang out for a little while. And
Okay.
if anyone has questions, if you need to go.
Okay, that sounds great. Thanks. You too. Bye, everyone.
Amber, I was the one who asked about like how would you kind of go about, trying to be more trauma responsive.
Uh-huh.
And I think so, kind of listening to your suggestions, what I'm realizing is that I think we were kind of headed in that direction pre-COVID.